what can you tell our listeners? Let's talk about the ILA. Now, everything that I read today on air was hearsay from people that have had dealings with the ILA and various ports and stuff. And it was framing this narrative that this
Well,
is...
I think the first thing to talk about, Mike, is that 90% of all internationally traded products are carried by ships.
Okay.
And that's first and foremost. And, when you talk about 36 ports that have stopped operating, that is, in essence, blocking half of all the cargo going in and out of the country. J.P. Morgan will tell you it's going to cost this country a minimum of $5 billion per day. And you add this on top of already high freight rates due to Houthi and the blowfish in the Middle East, who seem to be trying to shoot at everyone driving through the Red Sea or the Straits of Hormuz. This longshoreman strike will translate, obviously, if it goes long, into much higher price inflation. But it's different than the price inflation that we saw during COVID.
Okay.
This is a supply-side shock, which is due to lack of capacity, versus a demand-side shock during COVID where people were flush with cash from stimmy checks and were buying stuff because you couldn't go out and there was more demand than there was ability to move due to clogged supply. And it's kind of like, how the hell did they push oil to negative 40 a barrel back then? Because the ports were clogged and there was tankers sitting with oil that had nowhere to go. So fine, we'll pay you $40 a barrel to take it. Any way you look at it, this is a situation that is not good for the economy, but a supply side shock is far worse for the economy than a demand side, because at least in the demand side shock, people were buying stuff, and you had to wait 8 weeks to get your couch, or you had to wait 12 weeks to get your headlight from Volkswagen or whatever it may be, but people were buying things. And now it's not an issue of that. It's more of an issue of the ports just being jammed up. And then, of course, you talk about the perishables. You talk about the medicines. This is a problem. You're going to have containers that will just have to be, in essence, thrown away because what's inside of it goes bad. And this is a problem, Mike, that I don't see getting better anytime soon. You take a look at the way they do things in China.
Okay.
You got 5 or 6 young kids sitting in a room with computer screens and joysticks that are operating the cranes, and it's all automated. And this is a problem. This is not what the union wants here. In fact, they want to set limits on the use of automation for cranes, gates, and trucks. And not only that, the union is seeking a 77% increase in pay over the next 6 years, and is concerned that its jobs will be lost due to the automation. And you look around in much of the world and their ports, that's indeed what is happening, automation. But, this is going to be a big deal, especially for auto manufacturers, because almost all of the cars come in and auto parts in South Carolina and Baltimore. So, it's not something that I expect to go quickly, and not something that I expect will be pleasantly received. May not happen right away. May not go into the CPI numbers, prior to the election, but people will start feeling this if this goes much longer than a week.
You mentioned the automation part and the kids sitting in rooms with joysticks and television screens who are doing what the stevedores or with the crane guys. Actually, we had a story earlier today where I was asking the question, well, how does this stuff actually work? What does a longshoreman actually do? And I actually got the answer, and I was kind of brushing up and catching up on things that I didn't know about how longshoring works. You've got the guys that are crane operators, you got the swingmen, you got the bosses, you got the clerks, and you got the lashers here. So you still have to have some labor component. But you're not the only one, because I saw your and my old buddy Larry Kudlow yesterday on with Neil Cavuto. Larry Kudlow is a smart guy. He's been around a long time. And Kudlow was saying what you were saying. He goes, he said, Neil, we are so far behind when it comes to modernizing our ports, it's a joke.
Yeah, you could say the same thing about our infrastructure too. It's probably a better idea to give $200 billion to the Ukraine with no congressional oversight than to modernize our ports or our infrastructure, and that's kind of the issue here. This is something that is not a quick fix, and either you completely automate the system and tear up the old plan and start anew, or you don't. And that's what these workers are saying. This is not something we're going to stand for. You got 45,000 workers who from Maine to Texas that are doing this, and it's the first stoppage since 1977. This is not a good thing at all. And I don't think that the government's going to get involved. There's that old Taft-Hartley Act of 1947.
Right.
And you got 170 trade groups are urging the Biden administration to intervene, right? Well, they won't do it, I don't think, because these numbers will not show up into the next CPI numbers. It would be the one after. And so into the election, it's not going to be negative. And you don't want to piss off the union members because they'll vote en masse, and they will massively vote against the Harris campaign. So I think they're going to let this. They're going to let the two sides try and settle their differences, but they're a long way. They're not even speaking. They're a long way away from this getting fixed. So yeah, the ramifications of this in terms of price inflation is big, but not as big going into the election as people would think because of the lag effect. This will take a little bit of time to show up in the numbers. People will feel it, but not enough to be documented in the numbers. But if indeed they get in and force the workers back to on the job while they negotiate, that cooling off period they call it, well, not only that, you're going to piss off the union members so much that you're going to have an immediate 45,000 port workers immediately vote against you. And that doesn't even take into account the members on the West Coast who are not on strike because they're paid much higher wages than the East Coast. And, but yet I would think they would all vote along the same lines because, if they're coming for automation on the East Coast, they're coming for the same thing on the West Coast.
Right. Andy Schectman of...
There's 81,000 dock workers.
81.
If you talk all the East Coast and Gulf ports, it's a big number.
Yeah, 81,000 is the number that we got. Andy Schectman of one of the co-owner of Miles Franklin Precious Metals. Find them online. Our gold and silver and precious metal sponsor here on the Crusade Radio Network. Find them online and do business with those guys who do business with us at milesfranklin.com. Miles Franklin, M-I-L-E-S, Franklin.com. Andy, question I have about this is, okay, who is the boogeyman that the ILA is negotiating with? Because I can't seem to find who actually pays these guys. Is it the people that own the companies that own the ports? Is it Hapag-Lloyd? Is it Sea Land? Is it Maersk? Who pays these guys?
Well, I'm not exactly sure who is paying them. I think it's probably it's a group of all of them. It's the shippers.
Mm-hmm.
It would be the, I suppose, primarily the shippers and the logistic carriers who arrange payment. I'm not exactly sure. That's a good question. In fact, in all of the stories that I have read, there isn't much to talk about that. And it's an interesting point. But my guess is it's the logistics organizers and the shippers in general that are going to end up paying for it. So I don't know. My guess is it's just the main logistics hubs that are doing the negotiations on behalf of all of the shippers.
But when it comes to, you're in Florida, right?
Yes.
Okay. When it comes to, like, say, the ports are in Florida, you got Jacksonville, you got Miami, you have Pensacola. I know I'm missing one. I probably have one in Fort Myers. Who actually owns? I just maybe I need to do a deep dive on this. Who owns the port? Do the cities own the ports? Because it's a port. If you go to the port in New Orleans, you go like, wow, this thing goes for miles. You ever been to the port in New Orleans? It starts.
No, I have not.
Okay, it starts down around St. Claude Avenue, and it goes all the way just about to the G&O Bridge. That is about 2 miles, maybe longer. It's a huge stretch of land, and it's all port. There's not, this isn't like in the movies. This isn't the Pirates of the Caribbean. This isn't a cove that's sheltered. The Mississippi River is the port, and I just wonder, well, who owns the actual port? Okay, let's talk about that.
It's owned by the Port Authority, which is a public organization. It's not. They're rarely, if ever, privately owned. That I do know.
Okay, all right, kind of like at the World Trade Center. The PTA, right, or PAT, the Port Authority, is who owned the property that they built WTC 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 on. That used to be Port of New York originally. And the Port Authority, runs some of the public transportation too. So it's an interesting question with all the moving pieces here. But it would seem to me that ultimately that Daggett, who is the president of the ILA, and the ILA workers, they have the upper hand here. You cannot have this thing shut down for a protracted long period of time. It'd be like having the air traffic, the ATC controllers, the air traffic controller guys, walking out in 1981 and President Reagan invoking Taft-Hartley and going, go back to work. No, you will work a deal out. So it seemed to me that ultimately, like Daggett said, why don't you just come to the table and make the deal today? Because we're going to win. You think he's right?
Yeah, I do think he's right. Like you said, Kudlow said, we're so far behind the 8 ball in automation. This is not something you can do quickly. And you yank the longshoremen away, and in a matter of weeks, you would start to see ramifications that are systemically spread throughout the economy. I mean, if you can't sell cars because you're not getting those cars shipped across the globe into the ports, you can't get parts, you can't service your car. You're talking about manufacturing getting hammered here in the States because the majority of all of the precision milled tools and dyes and casts, a lot of this stuff is imported. Not to mention major exports for the U.S. being fruit and cattle, and major imports being medicine. And this is a huge deal that I think the ramifications are not fully understood yet. And the systemic nature of everything would start to spiral very, very quickly. Well, I do think that it would cripple the economy, and they know that.
Well, and then add to that, who knows how many billions of dollars of damage has been done in North Carolina and eastern Tennessee, western and southwestern North Carolina, northwestern Georgia, and parts of South Carolina there. You're talking major amounts of building supplies that are going to have to come in. Well, newsflash, we don't make all these building supplies. A lot of them are.
Yeah, and I'd like to know where the hell has the media been. I mean, you've covered in that one statement you just made. You've talked more about it than I see just about anywhere. They're just completely ignoring the devastation, which in many respects seems every bit as bad as Hurricane Katrina, and if not worse. So, yeah, I think these are the ramifications that people are not seeing. And, again, for political reasons, the Harris-Biden White House is not going to get involved in this. They're not going to tell them to go back to work because you do not want to anger the unions. And, it's interesting. You piss off the unions, that's a big problem. The Teamsters, who have typically voted Democrat over the last several elections, have not endorsed any candidate. They're kind of just sitting on the sidelines. Give them reason to say Harris is an idiot, and they will. And so they're gonna sit on the sidelines, I think, and let this unfold. It could get very dirty very quickly. So I guess we'll just have to wait and see. But the unintended consequences, or the consequences of this happening is far greater than product not coming in. A lot of that product is massively and integrally needed in other areas, and you start to disrupt those other areas from manufacturing to medicine. to grocery store shelves, and people will start to understand what that means. Probably the biggest immediate pain will be felt with the auto industry, just because the majority of all the cars in the country come in through South Carolina and Baltimore, as well as all the parts. And this is where it will start. And of course, all the perishables and the medicine that are sitting in containers that won't be opened will have to, in essence, just be thrown away. As these refrigerated containers, I don't know what the shelf life is, but it can't be that long. And sitting there for what could be weeks or months could be a huge problem.
Now, let's talk about, we have a couple of minutes left here with Andy Schectman of MilesFranklin.com. That's MilesFranklin.com. Your favorite subject here. Here's a Washington Post headline: Congress dodged a shutdown but may get an ugly December spending fight. These sons of bitches could not be bothered to sit down and try and work out any sort of not even a head fake towards fiscal responsibility and sanity. I just saw they just flashed up on the news on Fox News like it was a joke. The national debt clock, which seems to me every time I look at it, it's going faster. We're on a freight train to economic hell. And these guys just cannot be bothered to do anything about it. I know it's your favorite subject, so you saw them what they did. Now, that will have an impact on the CPI because they got to print the money to keep the government going.
Yeah, 100%. We're creating $100,000 of debt per second, every second, 24/7. We're creating $1 trillion in debt every 90 days. It took over 200 years to do that the first time. And my favorite little cliche is that 1 trillion seconds ago was 31,688 years ago. We're spending ourselves to oblivion. And the government's own conservative estimate is that it will take another $22 trillion in debt over the next decade. And again, when you see that the foreigners are no longer really keen on holding our treasury debt, which is being inflated away and is being weaponized, where we can steal $5 billion in Russian treasuries, say what you want, the world reserve currency is supposed to remain impartial. And it's okay for us to give $200 billion to the Ukraine and Stinger missiles and F-16s, but it's not okay for Xi Jinping to give Putin a penny, because Janet Yellen said if he does, we're okay with them being friends, but if he does, they will sanction their banks, their companies, in Beijing itself. And so these countries around the world are saying, what the hell do we want to hold treasuries for?
That's right.
It's a broke country that is going deeper and deeper and deeper into debt by the moment, and they are tyrannical and hypocritical. I'm not saying I think that, but most of the world, or much of the world, especially the Southern Hemisphere, does. It's not a good prognosis for funding our, as you say, massively irresponsible fiscal policy, when the traditional creditors that have financed our exorbitant standard of living over the last several years are fleeing. And you know what they're doing, Mike? They're buying gold instead, because gold has outpaced the 10-year Treasury over 25 years, 2-to-1. It just squeaked by the 10-year Treasury over the last 50 years, if measured. And so it has no counterparty risk if it's held in your own possession, no systemic risk. So these countries are saying, you know what, nuts to the Treasury. I'll buy gold. It's outperformed. It has no counterparty risk, has no default risk, has no inflation risk. And that's a problem to finance our debts, which means it will fall on the desk of the Federal Reserve, who will have to create more money to buy the debt. That's monetization. That's just a bad road we are heading down. And I guess I would simply say, if you're not a contrarian, you're damn well poised to perhaps be a victim. And if you store everything and hold all your wealth in dollars, you have a good chance of going broke. And that I do mean sincerely.
Well, I know a guy. His name's Andy Schectman at MilesFranklin.com, and you can get your gold and your silver and other precious metals there. Andy, I'm going to have to leave it there. Appreciate you coming on, as always, brother. Great to have you as a regular part of the program. You're a fountain of knowledge.
I appreciate it, Mike. And one last thing. Best for your listeners to send us an email at info@milesfranklin.com. Say Mike Church sent me, and we will send a price list that is far better than what they find online, and special for your listeners. info at Miles Franklin. Mike Church sent me in the subject line, and we'll make sure your people are treated really, really well.
All right, Andy, appreciate that, brother. I've got the address down. I'll pass it on to the rest of the crew. Thank you, man. We'll talk to you soon.
You take care, buddy.
Okay. All right, it's Andy Schectman. Info at milesfranklin.com.